Hello, everybody. Today, on our 15th episode of Inking Out Loud, we'll be wrapping up our read of Blade of Tyshalle, the second installment in Matthew Woodring Stover's The Acts of Cain. As with the last three episodes dealing in this universe, I'm once again reminding everyone that today's episode will be an uncensored one due to the nature of the dark discussions that we're going to have around this content. So, once again, I'm your host, Rob Santos. I am joined by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And we are fortunate enough, once again, everybody, to be joined by our own sound engineer, Mr. Patrick McCaffrey.
What's up, bitches?
Now, I like that. I'm in a bit of a pickle, honestly, because on one hand, my first instinct is to address the manner of the fucked up shit in which we had, in which we found ourselves subjected to during the second half of this book. But I feel like coming right out of the gate with, holy, what in the fucking shit bitching fuck was that? It kind of risks sounding a bit like juvenile, but I really don't know how else to articulate that feeling. Stover's writing is so good that it kind of makes the layer of filth across everything, that much more tragic, okay. Stover writing Blade of Tyshalle was like watching Michelangelo paint with liquid shit. When you take a step back and you look at the big picture, it's breathtaking. But when you take a nice close look, all you can think of is fucking stinks.
Well, I was gonna say it's more like embracing Sidene, where you gotta get through the.
Okay. Yeah, you have to just there's that slick filth on
oil
the surface, and you just gotta grate your teeth and plunge in. I suppose.
Not to mention that you'll inevitably go mad if you stay there too long.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I hadn't even considered
something
that.
I'm gonna dive into later in this episode.
I'm opening a beer because I'm gonna need a drink for the majority of this discussion. Huh.
I forgot to get beer. I was at the grocery store, and we can get full-strength booze at our supermarkets in Colorado now, and I forgot to get some.
I'm partway there with you. I forgot to get a beer, so I just went and raided the fridge, and my stepdad had some more Molson Canadian, so that's what I'm drinking.
Shit. I have apple juice.
Maybe we'll blink that until the very end when I mention what I'm drinking. Anyway, yeah.
So I'll kick off with a recap then.
Recap, yes.
Yeah, so where we ended the first half of Blade of Tyshalle was almost the low point of the book. It was the low point, I think, in the overall book, but not for Cain's specific arc. Pallas Rill had just been killed. Cain had announced that he was dead, and the Cain Slayer is now a thing instead of Wraith. And Kolberg had just demonstrated very vividly to Tanelkoff who's in charge, and shoot off his finger, which was pleasant, in the middle of his den, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
And
his den.
Yeah. But so where we pick up is Cain is in the Cain Slayer's custody, and he's being shipped to Ancana, where he's going to get imprisoned in the Imperial Dungeon once again, and will eventually be burned in this giant feast and sacrifice on Assumption Day. And of course, things don't quite go that smoothly. Cain does get imprisoned in the dungeon, but he meets Delian there, and he meets Tapas, the Cainist monastic ambassador, among other people, and then he eventually kind of civilizes the pit and foments rebellion, and when the time arrives, they break out. They gain control, and they do so right at a time when everything's really coming to a head. HRVP is in a complete outbreak because Wraith picked up Kosal, which had Pallas Rill and the River's kind of consciousness trapped in it, and she invaded Wraith, and they had a sort of duel of wills, and Pallas Rill won, and she poured out of Wraith and created a new spring all up and down the Chambagan, but it was tainted by the connection to the blind god through faith, and everything went just to shit, where we basically have this crazy jungle.
Literally and figuratively.
Everything is growing like mad, but it's also leaking for lack of a better term, the blood of the blind god, which is oil. It's like magical burning oil.
Oil, yeah.
And because everything is growing, it's everything, including HRVP. So everybody who had HRVP in Ancona, it got crazy accelerated, and madness broke out in the city. There was already the ongoing war between, the Imperial Army and the Thaumaturgic Corps and the Cats versus Kirandal's Faces and the Knights of Canton and all the Primals, basically. And so all of this is going on as Kane is developing a culture in the pit, but he's eventually sent into the shaft, where he has a sort of epiphany about what black flow is and what that means for him, that he has a shell of pure black flow, and he walks again. He magically sort of fixes his legs. And then again, the final converging point is that back on Earth, they implanted a thought emitter in Tanalkoth and used that to bring him into the blind god, and they send him and Kolberg, as well as multiple companies of social police, like elite military forces, to Overworld, to Ancona, and there's this crazy battle where there's magically powered, gunships and all of this stuff, and they're gonna nuke the city. And this is prevented by Delian, by Chris sacrificing himself in a kind of a final magical stand. And immediately after that, Kane uses Kosal to kill Milkoth. And the fallout is kind of in-depth, and I think we should save that discussion for a little later. But
sure.
Essentially, the book ends with Milkoth and Palace Rill, and like all the gods, kind of
Lamorak.
Subsumed into one called Home. And Home, kind of spearheaded by Milkoth's personality, has sealed all transfer from Earth to Overworld, and cut off all the remaining actors and social police and everything like that. And but allows the possibility to remain for travel between the worlds, because at the very end, Kane goes back to Earth and blows the fuck up Mark Velo's estate for betraying him. So that's about where the book ends.
Yeah. No, it was as it states on the cover, a big, bold, satisfying epic. But it definitely had its fair share of it just had its fair share of, and then you insert whatever word you want to use there.
Satisfying, forsooth.
Yeah,
see,
it was. I really, again, Stover really shows he's got this great ability. He has this prose that is fantastic. His cadence, his timing, the manner in which he paces the entire narrative, it's still spot on. If anything, he's only upped the ante since Heroes Die. But god damn, it was like, I do want to have a lot more discussion today about, of course, the nature of that dark content and whether it's really necessary or not. But I still want to say that overall, before I get too much into hating the book for that, I want to say it was a fantastic story. I loved it. No, I can't say I loved it. I enjoyed it. No, I can't even say I enjoyed it. I find myself so torn here, guys.
It is a unique experience.
It was definitely not an experience I've had with any other book I've ever read in my life. You want to just start getting our character discussion out of the way? Finish your thoughts.
So I think we should keep talking a little bit about the big picture stuff before we go into characters. Sure. And if you remember in the last episode, I talked about how in my initial review of Blade of Tyshalle that I wrote years ago, I called it a flawed masterpiece. And I gave it like 3.5 stars, which seems like a weird rating for something that you call a masterpiece. But now I think you have a better understanding of why I have this complicated relationship with this book.
Yeah.
Because the things he does in the book, he does some incredible things as a writer with Blade of Tyshalle. And he has really, really lofty ambitions with this book. But he mostly pulls it off, but there are some missteps that I think are not necessarily even related to what he was trying to pull off. Namely, like, the really, really dark, over-the-top graphic content, I think is the biggest misstep in this book. And it's not something that if you were to ask Matthew Stover, I doubt he would say, oh yeah, I messed up with that. I bet he would say, yeah, that's exactly what I meant to do.
Sure, of course.
But for my perspective, well, no, I don't even think it's a saving face thing. I think that is legitimately what he set out to do. He set out to make the grimmest, darkest story possible, and he succeeded in that. But for me, at least, like, that success isn't necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, okay, sure. Know? Okay. No, I agree. It's like, if you set out, and if that is exactly what he did and what he accomplished, I will say bravo. That was a damn good job. He set himself to do that, and he pulled it off. But I don't know how I feel about somebody setting out to write a dark book for the sake of writing a dark book. If you if you can think of a narrative that justifies it somehow, and I don't think that the kind of growth that we saw in our characters in this volume really justifies how deep down into the shit they went. Mm-hmm. But I'm just, again, I'm going to spend a lot of this podcast really, really confused about what I'm trying to say. But I also think anybody who discusses this book, who really appreciates this book, is going to have a lot of the same issues.
Yeah.
All right, I need to start at least the first segment of my rant.
Oh, yeah.
This is basically the big topic for me. Mm-hmm. I read a lot of dark shit.
Yeah?
And I like it for the most part.
To each his own. I'm not a big fan.
I don't mind when things are dark. When they're dark for the sake of being dark, and there's nothing redeeming about it. Okay, redemption is one of the bigger things that I have a problem with in this book. There's all this horrible stuff that happens, and it is explicitly stated in the text numerous times that, well, that's just the way things are, and like deep down, when you strip away all the layers of BS that people build up around themselves, i.e., things that are positive, then all of that is an illusion, and what you really get at the bottom of it all is the shaft. Cain is in the shaft when he's having these reflections, and he never tries to elevate the tone from there, despite the darkness. Like, Oathbringer spoilers coming up for people.
Okay, yeah, spoilers
if you haven't read that book. But it's a good example, one that we're all familiar with. The darkness in Oathbringer is not on the same level, I grant you. But there are moments that make you sit up, right?
Sure.
But the whole point of Oathbringer was to start down there at the bottom and then find a way to come up out of it. And the characters do that through personal growth, achievements, virtue, all of this good stuff, which is really satisfying to read. But I found absent from the main characters in this book, with the exception of Chris. Chris is basically the best person in the series.
Far and away.
Yeah.
But, I almost get the impression that it's like, well, if more horrible shit had happened to him, then he'd just be just as bad as all of the rest of them, too.
I don't get that impression.
Think about where we were introduced to Chris Hansen. He was introduced to us in Chapter 0 as this sort of just kind of rich, spoiled kid who's really a lot more concerned about his reputation than anything else. And you think about where he ends up. I mean, talk about black and white.
Well, and it's funny you say black and white there, too, because black and white is the comparison between Cain and Delian, between Hari and Chris. And going back to when we're really first introduced, it is the opening page. A tale is told of twin boys born to different mothers. One is dark by nature, the other light.
Oh, shit,
so So I think
forgot
that
about
right
that.
there, there's enough in this book, I think, to safely say that Chris wouldn't have become a product of bad things happening to him the way Cain did. That he did have really bad things happen to him in this book, and he championed above those things. He remained a real hero in ways that Cain is not a hero. You know, Palace Rill is not a heroine.
Yeah.
You know,
In every single way that Cain wasn't, Yellian was there.
Here's another open question. What does it say? What does it say about the tone of the book and the characters overall, that by nature they are black or white? It's not their actions that push them in one direction or another. It's just what they are. That bothers me.
Yeah, that on your note of like redemption.
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
gives the reader the sense that there's an inevitability to Cain being like an anti-hero.
Right.
And that there's no chance for him to claw his way or inch toward daylight. Because when it comes down to it, by the end of this book, you know, the inch toward daylight mantra from Heroes Die is completely thrown by the wayside after the shaft. You know, like it's the actual line is used, funnily enough, when he's like crawling up the shaft, where he's like, oh, this is gonna take forever, it's gonna be horrible to do this, but I'm gonna like elbows and hands pull myself up these steps and inch toward daylight. But metaphorically speaking, he's not inching toward daylight, because this apotheosis he's reached is an acceptance of coincidence and an acceptance of crappy things happening in life, and him choosing, I will live with this. I won't rise above it. I'll live with it.
Do you guys get vaguely, well, not even vaguely, nihilistic undertones throughout this book in particular?
I have
Yes.
I have a paragraph written down with some talking points that I wanted to definitely, you know, explore during the course of this episode here, specifically with Chris and his relationship with Harvey Michelson, with Cain, and how he actually influences Cain. But a lot of this I had really written down in my area for like specific like character point discussions. Do you want to dive into the characters since we're already like right here talking about these two, or do you want to?
I think we should continue with the high level stuff for a little bit more, because I do have more to say on that.
Yeah.
And Pat, because we haven't even we're just scratching the surface of the philosophy in this book.
True.
And that's where the other misstep,
Philosophy
I
of
think,
faith, really.
Yeah.
the other misstep that I think Stover had in this book that prevents it from being like a true masterpiece is that it gets a little like navel gazy, sorry. Wow. Freudian slip, I guess.
Sure, let's go with that.
You're forgiven.
But, I mean, it's there are points where the entire focus of the book slows down to have these extended philosophical musings that are in nature nihilistic.
Yeah,
and
they lead nowhere.
And exactly, there's no real like payoff for these other than Cain's like understanding of black flow, but
there's no catharsis. There's no catharsis at the end of this book, but what you get is revenge.
Okay, I mean, you get a little bit of that.
Sorry, Rob.
It's okay. Basically, what I was getting at is it's exactly what I was trying to touch upon when I used my simile at the top of the episode here about watching, like, reading this book is like watching, you know, Michelangelo paint with liquid shit, because it's he's a really talented writer. It's a great, you know, masterpiece to behold. You can stand back and look at all the detail, the talent that goes into crafting something like that, the contrast, the shapes, everything that it takes, the flow of attention where your eyes go. But at the same time, it's if you just get down to the materials he's using and what it means, everything in this, it's just this kind of hopeless message. Maybe a message of hopelessness, if that's what you want to say.
Yeah.
And again, I think it just comes out of what Drew was talking about. And Pat, I think you started us off on this. It comes down to whether or not there was any kind of pivotal change in the way the characters, and in their outlook on life. And Hari Kane, whoever you want to call it, he didn't really he didn't gain a lot. In terms of his attitude, in terms of his outlook, he didn't really learn much, I would say.
He had more of that in the previous book.
Yeah, but, I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
that wasn't as profound as it could have been in that book, or as it could have been in this book. That could have been a good first step to launch into something deeper in this book. But instead, we get, nothing really matters. Which, to any artist who uses that who ends up saying that, that's a real problem for them. They're shooting themselves in the foot, because then the audience immediately has to ask, well, why does this matter then? Why am I bothering to waste my time reading about this character who doesn't matter?
This kind of sounds like a little bit of Canism, doesn't it?
Well, so I would say, if you're going to tie this back in, Stover does sort of hedge his bets in that, because yes, he comes to this conclusion that, nothing really matters and shit happens. But so you then ask the question, well, then why does this book matter? And the answer from the philosophy in this is, well, because I chose for it to matter. I want it to matter.
Yeah, and that's basically where my entire thing revolves around.
But, so there's an answer in the book for that. At the same time, though, that is absolutely not a philosophy I can get behind. That is the height of selfish philosophy. It's self-centeredness. This is what I want, and fuck you all.
You could take that to the extreme points of view of justifying any atrocity that one could care to commit against another.
I mean, how many times does Tapas talk to Chris in the pit, and she says, what do you want, and what are you willing to do to get it? That's all that matters. Yeah, that's what she says. That's the heart of Cainist philosophy.
Her, interpretation of Cainism. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all pretty much in agreement that the philosophy in this book is a bit of a flaw.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, Drew, that is what kept this the book and the series as a whole from elevating to the real soaring heights of the fiction that I read. Like, you might call me selfish or entitled for having this viewpoint, and I don't care, but I read fantasy and sci-fi to be elevated.
Sure.
Now, sure. If that involves some darkness, so the fuck be it. But
sure.
But I did not feel elevated after reading this book.
There was certainly an adrenaline high at the end of this book, because the climax was phenomenal. Like, say what you will about the underlying philosophy and themes in this book, the way it ended was so damn good.
Yes, as far as events in the book that I'm happy happened, the explosion was good.
The way he wrote that whole sequence with the nuke, the tension just ratcheted it up. I mean, oh my gosh.
Are you talking about the microsecond by microsecond breakdown of what's happening as this?
But even before that though, because there's the little lines where it's like, Chris Hansen had 9 minutes to live.
Oh yeah, and then 6 minutes to live.
Yeah,
and then of course once they drop the payload, it's 173 seconds left to live, or something like that.
Yeah. And then it gets down to the point where he's doing things in the minute amounts of time between microseconds and
10 to the -4 microseconds. Starts in his pineal gland. His brain is boiling from X-rays, gamma bursts. I was like, that's cool. Okay, I can get on board with that.
Yeah,
it is all good enough for me to wish that Stover was in a better place when he wrote this, because it does read to me like someone. No, seriously,
No,
like
he's got
someone
a
who
point.
was in the midst of a deep depression. And it's not often with a series or any author at all that you can sort of look at a given work in their catalog and kind of analyze their emotional state as opposed to the things that came before and after it.
Yeah.
Like the Wheel of Time, for all the books, the tone is very consistent throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The tone is consistent, yes.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny you say it, because I agree. I think that Blade of Tyshalle is by far the darkest book in the series, and when we get to Cain Blackknife, there's a note of levity throughout it, a sort of carefree, more humorous aspect to Cain Blackknife
I think you told me that last week.
I feel like when Stover was writing this, he was like, I have to do these things.
Get it out of my system.
When he got to Cain Blackknife, he's like, well, now I am free to do whatever I want with Cain. And the way, again, going back to my personal reviews of these, I called Cain Blackknife an unadulterated love letter from the author to his main character.
Okay.
It's fun in ways that Blade of Tyshalle just is not fun.
A little better about going forward. Yeah, it makes me feel a little better about going forward hearing you say that, at least.
I was really trepidatious after finishing this book for the first time about
where the series was going.
Yeah.
And
I have to admit a lot of confusion when I got there, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well, I mean, I'll come right out right now and say straight up, without a doubt in my mind, that if it weren't for this podcast, if I just picked up these books, I probably would have made it through Heroes Die. I can guarantee you I would not have made it through Blade of Tyshalle. I would have dropped it right around the scene, probably in chapter 9 when Cain has to witness Palace Real's death, and I would definitely, like, without a doubt, if I somehow made it through that, I would have dropped it in chapter 16. Okay. I would have dropped it right there.
Is that when when all the stuff is happening with Faith?
Yes, that's exactly, that's when I made the decision. I was like, okay, this is, I don't know how he's going to try and redeem this, but that was the point at which I said, nope, that is unequivocally, without a doubt, too much. And and this is a big problem of mine, going back just briefly to an earlier discussion point we had in this episode about whether it's, it kind of mimics real life. You can have the author say what they want to say. Oh, yeah, it's the nitty gritty, but, it's just realistic. Shit happens. It's that kind of pointless, nihilistic view that's like, it's a little more realistic. But I don't read fantasy for realism. That seems kind of counterproductive to me. Well, when I read fantasy,
indeed,
to experience that which doesn't normally happen here in life, that which is spectacular, things that no one here are ever going to really experience. I love that complete, detachment from reality, the escape that it offers.
I think
that's depressing when you put it that way. But
it's not just escapism, though.
No, it's not. It's not. That's definitely a part of it.
If the authors or whatever do their jobs right, there are things that tie back around to reality, and once we leave the work behind, we tackle the world again with a fresh air, or with new ideas and new perspective, new resilience.
Yeah, that's
if we can draw that from the work that we're experiencing.
That is supposed to be kind of the ultimate goal of speculative fiction. It allows you to discuss and analyze and critique aspects of the real world from a remove. It allows you to look at things from a different perspective and get your readers thinking.
But like Rob's saying, I really enjoy the fantastic as well.
Oh, certainly. Escapism is a thing.
When I can ride on the back of a dragon into battle in real life.
Why was that already the image I was using? Before you even mentioned that, I was thinking of like dragon riding on a back somewhere. Like, why is that when you like?
It's the classic. It's the cliche. It's
well, so
and I don't read. Honestly, I hate dragons. I'll just throw that out there too. Fuck dragons. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
Well.
Overdone.
I want to rewind just like a little bit and
go on.
Staying on the high level kind of discussion of this book, but going back to where I was talking about the tone of Blade of Tyshalle versus the tones of like Heroes Die and Cain Blackknife, the books before and after it. what did you think of the humor in this book?
I loved it. The humor was way better than it. Well, not way better, but it was better than it was in Heroes Die. I actually loved the humor in this book.
Okay.
Especially the situational humor. Like I touched on this very briefly in the last episode, but the situational humor was just fucking awesome. And of course, we had our fair share of Kane's epic one-liners. I felt it improved.
He can make me chuckle, but overall, I think he tends toward being too vulgar in his humor. Like if he dialed it back 20 to 15%, I think I'd enjoy it a little more.
Yeah, okay.
So
I don't know if I see much of a difference between the humor in this book and the one in the previous book. I would say it's on the same level for me.
The scene that comes specifically to mind was Tanel Koth acting as a super hacker with his godlike ability from Earth. I mean, that was just using Tanel Koth in that fashion was just the situational humor there was just shining to me. I loved it. And then, of course, you have an epic one-liner from Tanel Koth there. It's like, did it work? We succeeded. Are you sure? I am Tanel Koth. I love that. I want to discuss that line specifically when we talk about Tanel Koth's character.
So
if you want to say something, yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of lines that I highlighted because I do think, while Heroes Die was funny, I think there were some better, really highlight moments in this one. And one of them is Kane's kind of first encounter in the pit with Adder. The first time I read this book, I was, sitting on the couch out in our family room, and my wife was back in her room. And she's on the computer doing something, and I burst out laughing. And she yelled at me because she is like, I don't want to know. Don't talk about it. But but it's when Kane is trying to get a drink of water, and he just goes and takes a drink of water without paying the toll, as it were. And Adder, he's like, Kane, I think in the mouth isn't enough. Not for you. I think I'm gonna have to do your ass. That's like a surcharge, for taking the drink on credit. And then Kane's response is just brilliant, where he's like, what is it with you guys? This whole butt raping thing, I don't get it. I mean, I don't have any quarrel with rum pumpers. Whatever sharpens your sword, you know what I mean? But what is it about nutballs like you that makes you want to fuck a straight? But just the terminology there, rum pumpers and whatever sharpens your sword,
yeah,
it's the colorful, creative language Kane uses over and over and over again throughout these books.
Yeah,
I haven't read anything like it, and I've read. I've read Scott Lynch and Joe Abercrombie and these guys that people talk about
Scott
being
Lynch
hilarious.
Is so good in this regard, yeah.
Scott Lynch is hilarious.
Yeah,
but he doesn't quite have the same turn of phrase that Matthew Stover does.
It's not the same, although they have similar strengths in this
Stover's
regard.
feels a lot more natural to start with. It Scott Lynch has a style where it's very flowery. It's fucking it's unparalleled. But
nice
Stover's got a more kind of modern feel to his insults, to his vulgar language, to his
I feel like Scott Lynch uses curse words as a little more of a crutch in his one-liners than Stover does. Stover gets more creative.
I think Lynch has the same flaw.
Yeah. But the sea is full of fish.
But that said, the other one that I have to bring up, because it's if we're talking about one-liners, it has to be there. It's when when Kane has chopped Milekoth in half.
Oh yeah.
And he has this beautifully written moment. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a page and a half long, but it's beautifully written, great imagery, where he has this touching heart-to-heart moment with Palace Real's consciousness and their final goodbye from each other, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this. I don't have words to talk about how genius the writing is.
Hand gestures there,
but the it's this profound moment, and it ends with Shauna says goodbye, Hari, and I cannot even reply. Instead, I give farewell to the man trapped within the dying god at my feet. Happy Assumption Day, fucker.
Yeah.
Like, he builds up over the course of like a full page of beautiful, flowery, emotional, and then just drops that line.
It's like this. It's like watching this giant, beautiful flower just blossom in real time, right before your eyes at thousands of times speed. It's gorgeous. What's it going to turn into? This central flower, a petal opens up, and it's a middle finger, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I loved it.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, so.
I wanna touch on the characters a little bit.
Dope.
The first non-character that I want to talk about.
Non-character.
So we've been saying before that in this book he goes as far as one can go, that he makes it as bad as it can get. That's not strictly speaking true because of Faith. Faith is not really
a Stover.
Yeah, I mean Stover. Stover is not going as far as he could have because of the character of Faith, and I say character in its loosest sense because she's just a girl. We don't.
She has very little character.
She has no personality. She has no nuance. I mean,
she's a totem.
She's just a kid.
6. How much personality is she?
But her role in the story.
Ask Orson Scott
She's
Card
a
how much personality a 6-year-old
used to torture that fucking character.
Yeah. She's a totem for Kane more than a character in and of herself.
I'm arguing that all of that would have been. It kind of didn't hit me that emotionally hard, and it would have if she was a person.
Yeah.
I
suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, it still hit me pretty fucking hard.
I'm sorry. Reading that, like I said earlier, it was in chapter 16. I remember that specifically because I remember looking at it and thinking, I'm going to bring this part up specifically. She's 6. She has a personality, I think, a little bit. She's definitely a narrative device. She's used by Stover as the one manner in which he could torture his character farther, like in a much more gruesome and disgusting way than he could ever have imagined physically doing to him. However, no, I'm not, like, I honestly lost my train of thought there.
No,
I can't, sorry, go on. Go ahead. I'll see if I can finish that thought.
In response to Pat's comment, like, yeah, he could have done worse with Faith. Like, he could have made what happened to her more physical, like worse in the physical sense, because
he could have gone into more description.
Anguish. Most of her anguish is magical, mental, like.
Yeah.
But it is still like it's there's only so much you can read about a 6-year-old girl sedated and strapped to like a gurney, screaming in anguish. So many times you can hear these descriptions before you're just like just stop.
Just beaten down. I didn't mean worse in the sense that like what you meant, like they could have been torturing her physically or raping her physically while that happened. I mean, yes, you're right, that could have happened.
And especially because there was the explicit description that was going to happen. I mean, the number of times Kohlberg is standing there with like his face like smeared against the window,
you got it right as I was leaning forward to say that. I was saying the one detail to me that really the one detail that sticks out more than anything other. Just as Drew mentioned that, I was leaning forward to say it was when Kohlberg had his face pressed against his window, and you could just see like the description of the fog of his breath pulsating against that window with like this animal pant, and I was like, this is like, I mean, it was too much hours ago.
Yeah,
when you're ramping up and up and up, you eventually hit a ceiling.
And I think that was the ceiling.
Yes.
No, my ceiling was a little before that, but that was...
Well, no, the ceiling in the book was the ceiling. Like, that scene was the ceiling that we reached in Blade of Tyshalle. Sure. My personal Event Horizon was way back in, like, Heroes Die. Like...
Yeah, okay.
Like, when frickin' Arcadiel is pouring the wasp larvae into Lamberac's leg. That was about where I was like, okay, all right.
Okay. As soon as they brought bugs into people's flesh into the equation was probably the worst part of the book for me.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Yeah.
No, but it's like... I honestly think I would have a better impression. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I want to go back to Pat because he was the one who initially brought up Faith, and I think we interrupted his point.
Yeah.
I've read plenty of good child characters. They exist. It's not like Faith couldn't have been developed more as a character. He just didn't. And I guess I'm grateful, ironically, that he didn't develop her, because all I'm saying is if he had, that situation would have been worse from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
It would have been more painful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The ceiling could have actually been raised just for that sequence.
I guess the fact that she had so few viewpoints was kind of was a good thing for the year.
If he had made Faith like 10 or 11 and had points of view from her in Heroes Die, and then had her like as a semi-main character in this, and then go through all that would have been horrific.
Yeah. You know, and slightly on the other end of that, you know how I feel he could have made that at least a little more palatable, if he had found a way to magically wipe her mind at the end.
Yeah. You know?
At least cut her that much fucking slack. Like, how do you...
Something to make it okay.
Yeah, I mean, that girl's not grown up to be any kind of normal. It doesn't make it okay, but I mean, it would... God damn it. Just think of what that girl has to live with now. Mm-hmm.
Because of who her dad is.
At least at the end of the book, she has her link to the river.
To Palace Rill. Yeah, she still has her link to the river and to the presence there. Yeah.
Something, but that's a thin read. If you're gonna try and live the rest of your life in any way, even approaching sanity.
Yep, I agree.
Speaking of not being able to live your life in any way approaching sanity, how about Wraith?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I didn't have any specific thoughts about Wraith. Well, I think I did, but nothing like about his character development. I liked where it went. I like where he left off, and I think his scenes were just, artistically speaking, the best written scenes. The most beautiful prose came out of Wraith's scenes, specifically.
He doesn't have to be the man that he becomes, just because of what happens to his father, which is kind of made explicit for me in the sequence where he's riding with Cain, and they're talking to each other. That's where Wraith really came alive for me, and I think probably for many other readers as well.
Sorry, say that. Sorry, I just I had a problem on my phone there. Which scene with Wraith?
The sequence where Cain and he
they're traveling together through
post
the...
yeah. And
okay, got you.
Kind of bearing their souls to one another.
Yeah.
That's when Wraith really came alive, and he became one of my favorite characters in the series at that moment. He didn't need to go as far as he did, and that's kind of... It seems to me like he just needed to talk about his problems with some qualified therapist.
Yeah.
And then all of this could have been avoided. It's not like a Baron situation where it's just like, you are filth.
Yeah, he's a psychopath.
I don't know how you became filth, but...
Yeah.
No, Baron was born a psychopath. like that guy is just horrible. But Wraith has like unresolved mental and psychological issues that, had he had a licensed therapist when he was like 11, we never would have gotten the events of Blade of Tyshalle.
I suppose.
But
Yeah.
Pat has a good point there with Wraith, where he ends the book. He is probably the most compelling character in the series, because he's the one character who I think exemplifies what Pat was talking about earlier, what he wants from darker stories, where Wraith comes from this very dark, very flawed, evil place, essentially, and learns. He grows, and he strives towards light, and he makes sacrifices at the end. He has a metaphorical, barely metaphorical stigmata that he chooses to carry with him as, like, sticking with the Christian Catholic imagery here, like, it's his cross to bear, that his hand is eternally burning with the oil of the blood god, and that he is the compacted link the blind god keeps with Overworld, because that's like, you know, how the magic has to work. You know, he's the channel, he's the focus point, and he has to be strong for the rest of his life. And he accepts that willingly. And he wanted that. I mean, that scene with Delian and Wraith, and Delian flashes on him and gains this understanding of what Wraith wants and what Wraith needs. And what he really needs is sacrifice. He doesn't want to be forgiven. You know, he needs a cross to bear. And he needs to grow as a person. And he's given this opportunity to do so.
Yeah. So where do we think that pivotal moment was for Wraith? Because I have a theory. Well, I mean, I guess. It's
on the boat.
What? Sorry.
On the boat. I think it's
when he learns that his murder of Pallas Real, is actually going to end humanity. When he realized that Pallas Real was actively working against this HRVP, and he was dooming humanity in his evil actions for like his selfish revenge.
I'm hesitant to say that's the point, because that's I think he didn't quite figure it out yet at that point. I think the turning point for him was after Kane left the boat and he feels the pull of his addiction to the Kane mirror, and he refuses to go look at it one last time.
Okay.
I think that's the turning point with Wraith.
Yeah. He's
okay.
It's gradual, which is nice. It's not heavy-handed in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Again, something I appreciate about his character.
Just like talking about Stover's the way he writes this character of Wraith. The manner, like, it's almost like he hits this switch and he just starts writing in a much more eloquent manner. It's like, I have a quote written down here from the narrative. It's just it's a few sentences, and I it really it kind of resonated with me because it was just so well worded. And this is something that Drew was talking about actually just a couple minutes ago. So in the text here, it was as Wraith is stumbling through the burning city, he's looking for Kane, and he felt the gate that the goddess had closed in his mind, the gate that his touch upon the sword had reopened. He turned his will upon that gate and shattered it so that it would never close again. He would bear the ache, the legion of rats that chewed into his guts, that he would bear the black oil stigmatum, small enough penance for his great sins. So we see, like, even at the very end, the main reason, the whole I guess crutch of his character there at the end, the reason for his total turnaround is because he believes he has this penance, he has this thing to atone for, and that, of course, I assume is just the way, like, the manner in which he has doomed the world.
He's very correct. Eyes. He's very correct in that he has much
to
for, but
you know, like, this is his self-imposed. Well, I guess any kind of penance really is self-imposed, but like, this is what he believes he has to do to atone for what he considers his sins. Mm-hmm. So he's already turned at that point. He considers them to be sins, but he has still something to pay for.
Mm-hmm. And so, on the topic of like sins and the religious connotations there, Wraith has a really interesting relationship with religion because he grew up a beloved child of Malkoth, and into his adult life, and especially in the events of this book, he learns the truth behind the religion. And he, maybe this is like, meta Canist philosophy crossing characters, even though he's not a self-professed Canist. But the scene when he goes back into the crates on the barge to look at Kosal and to touch it, and that's when he sets off the whole events of the climax. There's a really interesting paragraph where he says, though he now knew the truth behind the faith he'd practiced these many years, the faith remained. Somehow, he was able to see Cain as both an ordinary man and as the enemy of God, capitals, at the same time, without contradiction. Within this case was a blade that was only a weapon, but also a mythic symbol of the power of a god, who was only a man, but no less a god. And so Wraith, it's just another layer of his character where Wraith is a man of contradictions from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of the book, he's gaining an awareness of his contradictions, but he still makes his choices as a character. And this is one of them, where he chooses to believe in Malkoth nonetheless, though he knows that Hanto the Scythe was originally just some random disfigured necromancer, but became, in essence, a god, not because he gained all this magical power, but because of the power of the faith of the beloved children. That the collective, like, cultural consciousness of being beloved children of Malkoth is what Wraith needs as a touchstone in his life.
And, not just Wraith. There was a moment with Tonelkoth as well. Speaking of course, of contradictions and what it could mean for the importance of someone's character. In chapter 18, Tonelkoth, we got him described as, the man who had been a god.
Yes.
And then, he loses himself in the presence of the blind god who, and then when he returns to Earth and he opens his eyes as the god who had been a man.
Mm-hmm.
So this plays along into our whole our just subject of discussion here, contradictions and how important they can be for a character's growth, and how useful they can be as a narrative device as well.
Oh yeah, and this goes back to Heroes Die, even with the Hari Kane dichotomy.
Yeah,
like it's a series long theme that Stover definitely digs into a lot, mostly in this book, but it's there for sure. I mean, we have multiple examples of it. Yeah. There's a lot of duality in this series.
Yeah, you could say that for sure.
And the myth. So you're bringing up the whole idea of the man who had been a god and then the god who had been a man. I talked about the myth, the end of chapter myth construction that he does, in the last episode, and we discover at the end of this book that Chris, that Delian, is the one who wrote this myth. That this is his way of kind of processing the events and coming to grips with what happened and why, and finding meaning. And it's it's fun because it was a way for Stover to tell us in advance what's going to happen while leaving things mysterious. It's great foreshadowing. It is foreshadowing on a level of, like, Robert Jordan in The Wheel of Time with the prophecies and things where he outright says, this is what's going to happen, except there's so much leeway in the wording that you had whole theory sites popping up for 15, 20 years and people arguing.
Just enough open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Not too much, not too little. Definitely.
Yeah, and so you get this point at the first page of the book where it says the twins, the one is dark, one is light, one is rich, one is poor, all that, and it says they both die fighting the blind god.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, we're kind of put on our guard because we know the first book was called Heroes Die, and Kane,
that's a depressing title, isn't it?
Our ostensible hero, dies metaphorically, but not literally. And then, so we have, in this book, we're like, okay, they both die fighting the blind god. Well, we already know he likes to play with metaphor. So what's really going to happen? And then, midway through the book, Cain dies, metaphorically, once again. And we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is, but then at the end of the book,
dead.
Chris does die. He blows up. Like, there's a literal death. And then, once again, he subverts our expectations with the resurrection of Delian, not Chris, but Delian, and the creation of a primal emperor who is only there because he is going to, like Wraith, carry a cross, but even more than Wraith, an eternal cross. He's immortal. If he gets killed, like he won't die of sickness or old age, but if he gets killed, Home, Malkoth, Tenaldion, whatever you want to call it, like, they're just going to rebuild his body and put his consciousness right back in it.
Yeah.
This is an eternal cross to bear.
He deserved to hear that, I think. Delian, yeah. Well, like, speaking of Chris / Delian, do you want to move on to that character, like, officially, or do you think we should, like, cover a main character? Well, I guess a more main character like Kane first.
Let's leave Kane for last.
Wraith. Okay, let's save Kane for last. So, and this is, I'm kind of glad we get the chance to do this here and now, because last week I didn't really get to discuss much about Chris Delian. Or was that Wraith? That I had a whole bunch.
We didn't talk about Rafe last week.
Oh,
we didn't talk about Rafe at all last week. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. So speaking though of Chris, I still have a few points that I wanted to get out of the way. So, okay. So hold on a second here. Let me make sure I got my. For some reason, I thought it was Wraith that we hadn't discussed. I'm just gonna move slightly more down the list. Okay. So there's a reason that I found that Chris and Hari needed to become friends. I do that all the time, by the way. I'm so impressed that I got 15 episodes without doing that yet.
Another
it will happen more in the future. It will happen. I guarantee it. Yeah.
So, all four.
Anyway, they needed to become friends. And I have a feeling that this is because there was a lesson that Hari needs to be taught. And it's a lesson that only Chris can teach him. And that lesson is... Well, hold on. Let me back up a step here. When Hari argues against his reputation, everything's supernatural. The references to Vishnu, Shiva, the Destroyer.
Yeah.
Chris is attempting to ascribe to Kane. Kane just waves it off as coincidence. He says it doesn't mean anything. But Kane's mistake, though, and what I think Chris is teaching him here, is that we begin to see, coincidence doesn't mean irrelevant. It's as Chris himself points out, everything is a coincidence, Hari. What matters is what you decide it means. In this case, and it's at this point, we get the starting point, the edge from which Kane can eventually take that leap of faith. Mm-hmm. And speaking of faith, this is what I wanted to touch on earlier, too. This is a great example of what I think the philosophy of faith itself is. It's not the nature of coincidence that matters. It's so much as how you interpret that coincidence. So that I think is the entire purpose of Chris's character up to this point.
So I will comment on that within the bounds of this story.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that is exactly what Stover's going for.
Yeah.
And it's why at the end of this book we are given to understand that the Kanist philosophy is the heart of all other philosophies, religions, faiths, and that's why, despite all book long Tapas saying it's not religion, it's philosophy, and at the end being like, oh yeah, no, it's religion.
Yeah.
So
that's how you interpret it, I suppose.
I mean, I'm not going to personally comment on whether or not I agree with the idea that what faith means to you is all that matters about faith.
No. Let's say that this is like something that I see repeated a lot in fantasy. I should say that this isn't like expand really much beyond this podcast.
Sure. I on the other hand will personally comment on it and say that I think that it's bonkers.
Yeah.
Again, let's cast it back to the overarching discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously the way that you interpret the coincidence of reality is something that is going to personally impact your viewpoint. That's not like a grand revelation, something that we just couldn't possibly figure out. The point is that if it's all based on only what matters to you, then it's worthless. As far as any overarching... As far as any overarching view of the world or society,
well, it's what we talked about earlier. It's ultimately nihilistic.
Yeah, it's not. If you want to live in a world where it is just all about you, well, some people make that choice, and they tend to have miserable lives.
Yeah, and I think that was the
Kane,
whole point.
For instance, has a miserable life.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, I think that was the whole point of Chris's character was to kind of voice that possibility. Mm-hmm. So maybe like a little light in the darkness. Like, this book is... Stover knew what the book was when he wrote the book. He was like, this is dark. I need to give them a little light by which to see. A little candle in the darkness.
Yeah. And
I think that was
Chris is
the
definitely the main
character.
Yeah, he's the main ray of light, ray of hope in this book. Although Wraith again, like Wraith by the
Wraith
end of
has
it,
some moments.
Wraith is probably the most dynamic character in this book.
Yeah, I would agree.
Ironically, Pallas, the literal goddess, doesn't have much to offer us in this arena.
So this was the next character discussion that I wanted to go to, and it involves Pallas, but also Kirindal, and like there's an interesting thing where I feel like a lot of fantasy books from like the early 90s onward, especially written by male writers, went out of their way to strive for some type of equality in point of view characters. And when we got that a little bit in Heroes Die, where Pallas Rill and Kirindal had significant point of view time, much, much less so in this book. I think Stover kind of admitted that no, this story is just about Cain, and to a lesser extent, Milkoth. And so in Blade of Tyshalle, Pallas Rill like really doesn't get much. I mean, she gets killed halfway through, obviously, and then she has these like weird semi POVs during her struggle,
which I really enjoyed. Those were kind of cool. Just they were
cool.
Yeah.
Impersonal but cool.
Yeah.
Well, it was personal for Wraith. It wasn't personal for Pallas. But that's my point, is that all of the effective, profound personal character development in this book was for the men, for all male characters.
Yeah.
Kirindal like stays Kirindal. Pallas Rill stays Pallas Rill. Faith is, as Pat mentioned, a non-character. Like, there's no character arc or development for her. And I have to wonder, like, do you think this was a good decision? Because I thought in Heroes Die, Pallas Rill made a really good foil for Cain.
She did. I will comment that Shermaya Dole actually experienced a taste of real life, and that changed her for the better. That's about as far as female development goes.
Shermaya Dole's dead in Blade of Tyshalle. Her like nephew or niece or whatever like cut off Pallas Rill. She was Pallas's patron.
Oh no,
Shauna's patron.
I didn't.
Oh, you're talking about Avery Shanks.
Yes, I meant Avery Shanks. Sorry,
okay.
The little businesswoman name.
Yes,
confusion.
Yeah, okay.
Avery Shanks has.
Yes, she does.
So
she's really the only.
Yeah.
The only dynamic female character.
And I didn't see that coming. I thought she was just like when she was introduced, I thought she was just going to be a straight up just villain, like another villain stacked against the main character,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting her to.
She and Wraith have similar.
Yes.
I mean, Wraith, I think, is a more long-term hopeful character than Avery, because Avery remains like pretty self-centered and retains her like businessman caste mentalities.
Especially now that her entire cast is threatened by, outsiders.
But she just decides like, oh, I'm gonna protect Faith. She is more like Cain at the end.
Yeah.
Where she has this like,
I agree.
The things I care about, I will do anything for.
I agree.
To your point, though, I don't see any realistic way that could have been done unless you made Wraith a female character instead. That could have worked. I can't see. It would feel like shoehorning in something. I mean, maybe that's just because I've read the whole work.
Yeah, that's possible.
Without an addition of another female character.
I can't imagine it would feel too shoehorned in from somebody who hasn't read any of these before.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really interesting point, Pat, that I haven't considered before. It would have been kind of cool if a Wraith had been a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There could have been...
You'd have to change a few of the incidental things about...
Yeah, to an extent. But it's not like the monastics were sexist. There are plenty of female monastics. Like that's an interesting point. I think that would have been a cool dynamic with Cain, and it could have even added another layer to like with the mind control thing.
Yeah.
Where Cain could have had an even more complicated relationship with Wraith had Wraith been female.
Yeah. But I don't necessarily see the lack of
Female points of view.
Female points of view as a weakness of the book, because again, it's not really about anyone else besides Cain.
Yeah.
And Mild.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I don't know. I feel like in the frame of mind in which that Stover wrote this book, if Wraith had been female, I feel like that may have led to some altogether different but equally horrifying and gruesome kind of just like sexually centered violence, in a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're
another person for Colbert to rape and
oh
eat.
jeez.
We don't need that.
Yeah, I know. Goddamn Colbert. Even just the saying his name leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Like, I don't even want to talk about Colbert.
No, I don't. I didn't write down anything about Colbert, so I'm totally fine with just skipping that fucker. If you guys are cool with that too, I mean.
Tamelkoff, go.
Well, no. Before we get to Tamelkoff, because this will be quick.
Yeah.
Orbeck.
Oh.
I want to talk about Orbeck.
Sure, yeah.
And, like I said, there's not a lot to talk about, but an important thing happened.
More important character in book 3 then, considering it's called Cain Black Knife, and now that you want to talk about Orbeck...
An important thing happened.
Boom! Sorry, go ahead.
Where Orbeck adopted Cain formally into the Black Knife clan of the Ogreloi. And we know that Cain's first breakthrough adventure was Retreat from the Bodecan, where he, we don't know the details yet, but he apparently destroyed and dishonored the Black Knife clan.
Oh, I had forgotten that detail.
Yeah, which was at one point the most, intimidating, the fiercest, the most violent clan of Ogreloi. And, but as Orbeck said, he's like, any Black Knife, your dishonor is the clan's dishonor, and your honor is the clan's honor. So, because the clan was dishonored by Cain, Cain now carries that dishonor. But Cain has the honor of destroying the clan, and now Cain's honor is the clan's honor.
Oh.
So Orbeck, in that one moment, completely erased the cultural ramifications for the Black Knife Ogreloi.
Good for him. I hadn't considered that.
I did not appreciate that on the first read through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I will also say Orbeck's hilarious. I love Orbeck.
Yeah, he was cool.
Orbeck is pretty funny.
He's like a salty little punk. I mean, big punk, because he's an Ogreloi.
Very big.
And he still got his ass kicked by a fucking dude with a paraplegic,
Yeah, well, he also has
no normal dude.
Yeah.
He's definitely no normal dude.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, but I just wanted to bring that up about Orbeck, because I think that was that's a moment in this book that is a big deal, but immediately gets swept under the rug because there are more exigent issues to be dealt with, more immediately pressing conflicts, Mm-hmm. So there's this big character moment where Cain says, all right, fuck it, I'm Cain Black Knife, and yeah, like you said, Robbie, that's going to be an issue in the next book because it's called Cain Black Knife.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, cool. Are we about wrapping up with our discussion about? Sorry, it was Orbeck we were just on there. Where did you want to go next? I feel like we're about to jump.
We have Tamelkoff and Cain.
There we go. That's
They're
what
the last two.
Yeah.
And I love that character, so I have a lot to talk about with Tamelkoff.
Is this going to be a 2-hour episode?
I'm glad you have a lot to.
Don't know. Maybe we'll play it by ear.
I don't know. I'm glad you have a lot to talk about Tamelkoff, because it's almost like I kind of blew my whole Tamelkoff load, metaphorically speaking, in the previous episode.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I did blow a nasty load of Well, hold on. About Tamelkoff, not on Tamelkoff.
Oh, this
Okay,
is
Baron.
the Freudian episode.
Yeah.
Okay, Baron.
Episode 15. Freud meets Inking Out Loud.
Tunnel Koth is still a brilliantly written character as well. Every fucking scene that he's in is a golden scene. Well, yeah. Every scene he's in, not scenes that he's involved in necessarily, but scenes that like from his point of view are pretty damn awesome.
I felt like it was almost a waste to kill him at the end because
But he didn't die.
Well, he's not dead.
Well,
That's why. Yeah, exactly. He's,
I mean, you still have his
no more
great
dead.
banter with Kane. Like,
yeah. I don't know. Like with with Tunnel Koth, shit got really dark. Clearly, with where he went, but still, he was. Hold on. There was a note I had written here specifically about his recurring line, and I just can't get enough of the "I am Tunnel Koth." That coming back again and again. I'm starting to realize that Stover is showing a knack for saying so much with so very little. Think about like what is contained in that statement. I am Tunnel Koth. You have I am, which is like literally the shortest concise idea one could possibly form, and then you follow it up only with Tunnel Koth, which adds identity to that statement, and it ends the entire idea right there. But then you consider what it means, and everything it says without needing to say. And this, there were 3 moments where he had this golden one-liner. It was in chapter 5, when Hari is talking to Jed Clearlake. It's in the text. Hari hit the cancel and folded down the screen. Tunnel Koth rose and stretched until his shoulder joints popped with a pair of meaty squelches. Success. You're sure? I am Tunnel Koth. He said this without even the ghost of a smile. And then he said it again in chapter 7. And then he said it again in chapter 13. Avery Shanks is questioning him. She says, "You're in mind view. Right now? Don't you have to concentrate?" And he goes, "I am concentrating." "Well, then how can you still talk?" "I am Tunnel Koth."
Yeah.
In each case, every case in which this happened, it happened with Kohlberg as well. Every single time that he got to use that line, there was somebody casting doubt or at least question towards his ability. And the only response that he deigned necessary was a statement of identity. To this man who used to be a god, identity and ability are one in the same thing. And Stover, he doesn't choose to throw them all at you at once. He leaves enough space in between that it finds its way back into the narrative as more than a declaration. It's a reminder.
Yeah. So like what I wanted to talk about with Tunnel Koth's character is how he builds what is essentially a new character on the foundation of Milkoth in Heroes Die, where he's able to do things like this, where just the line, "I am Tunnel Koth," tells you everything you need to know because you have the context from Heroes Die of Milkoth, and you know this supreme confidence that he carries. But as Tunnel Koth, he has different motivations and different worries and different, aspirations, and he acts differently because he's in different circumstances, and he has renamed himself and remodeled his whole personality around this, to the point where Milkoth is now just the leading voice in his head among the billions of beloved children, where he's dissociated himself mentally from what he was before, and that word "was" is the operating factor there. And that's, the name change. Milkoth means in Lipkin means "I am limitless," and Tunnel Koth means "I was limitless."
Yep.
So all of Tunnel Koth's character is built around what was, but with a strong, driven aspiration to regain what was. And that's his main flaw as a character, because he retains this confidence of what was without realizing, like he's made the separation of identity, but he retains the mindset And he doesn't realize that that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
He's not infallible. He doesn't know everything. Like there's much more that he's not aware of. And he falls hard.
Yeah, because of that.
Because of his hubris.
He wasn't even truly limitless before, if
No,
we're gonna tell the truth. But
he wasn't, but he was near limitless.
Yeah, he was a lot more.
And basically the only person in Heroes Die who could prove his limits was Cain.
Yeah.
So, whereas in this, he expects Cain. I mean, all throughout the book, when he's dealing with the Board of Governors, when he's dealing with Avery Shanks, he's talking to people, and he's like, you are underestimating Cain.
Yeah.
Because he still has the mindset of, like, I'm limitless, but Cain is the only one who can beat me. And so these other people, he's like, no, you don't get it. You don't get it. Cain can beat you. Because he beat me. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't realize, in his current state, way more than Cain can beat him.
Yeah. Well, like...
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. You have to consider...
Colberg, for one.
Well, the blind god in general. Yeah.
Like, Tunnelcott's, like, the sheer range of his status, like, as an entity, from thinking himself endless to being, like, now humbled as a mortal... And now forced to confront how small he always was. When like especially in his interactions with Kolberg, it's only going to steal his nerve, I think, going forward, as who I assume is going to be a main antagonist going forward. Even though he's kind of dead, pseudo dead at the end of the book, I still think he's going to be I don't know, he's just too awesome of a character not to continue to cause problems in his own kind of badass way.
Okay.
So that's just one prediction I have going forward.
I appreciated that Honto the Scythe played a big role in the whole faith thing. That was really good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the crap out of that. Yeah, is still there, and like it's played off as like, oh, it's just one among many, but it is a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
For his character, and really, for the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If Honto the Scythe didn't take that opportunity, didn't lie in the weeds and wait for that, all was lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of have almost a dual nature in Tanelkoth.
Dual nature. Excuse me.
Subtle as ever. I like it.
Indeed. But
it's almost like this is a theme in the series or something.
Almost. Damn near. Reminds me of one of the times a friend of mine said, I was talking about a distance, and I said 300 yards, and he's like, 300 yards? That's got to be close to 900 feet. Like, damn near.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
close enough
damn
so
near.
Not to make a difference.
But no, I think, so staying on Tanelkoth, but we haven't really talked about his relationship with Cain, mostly because we talked about it in the first half, and it doesn't have much of an impact on the second half. Basically, the end of this book here, right, is the first time we get in the text the overt admission, and it's from Cain's point of view, where he says outright, he's like, I think he was in love with me. Mm-hmm. And, it was implied, there was some repressed homoeroticism between Cain and Milkoth in Heroes Die, and possibly not repressed homoeroticism between Milkoth and Bairn, but this, these male-to-male relationships, in whatever manner they develop, has always been a big point in the series, and that's why when you talked about earlier, you didn't feel like it lost anything by losing female point of view characters. I think I agree with you, because from the get-go, the most important relationships have been these male-to-male relationships, whether they're friendships between Cain and Majesty. and how those turn out, and or between Cain and Chris, or Cain and Milekoth, or Milekoth and Bairn. It's all about the male-to-male relationships across a spectrum. And this is the first time at the end of Blade of Tyshalle where Cain openly admits, you know what, like, there was definitely, like, a homoerotic connection between Milekoth and me.
Although he does point out that it wasn't so much physical from Milekoth's point of view, which is another interesting thing about Milekoth's
more
character.
homo-romantic, maybe, than homoerotic?
Yeah. It's strange to me that someone who, going through life as Honto the Scythe, is like this crippled, deformed person, and then made himself beautiful.
Yes.
Has no interest, or at least limited interest, in physical relations. That those two things strike me as strange.
See, I don't think so. I
didn't,
because I always saw like his philosophy on like beauty as an abstract thing.
Like subjective. I agree.
Yeah, and so I could see him having much more of an attraction to emotional connections that, he's like, like physical stuff, meh. Like, I want people to understand me and love me, and I want to understand and love them if I can respect them. And the only two people he respected were Bairn and Cain, for very different reasons.
Yes.
Quite obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
there are only a very limited few reasons to respect Bairn in any sense. But it was because of Bairn's understanding of him. It was Bairn's willingness to work with him, and it was Bairn's vulnerability when it came down to like the core of his character. Like, Bairn was an incredibly insecure person, right? He was he was the definition of over frickin' compensation. Like,
oh yeah,
everything.
Yup.
Oh yeah. But Cain, meanwhile, understood the like logical and rational inclinations of Milekoth, and understood his like peculiar desires to control things. And that was why he had that initial bond with Cain.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
It could be that Cain, as an icon to the people, and the legends about him present the only thing that Milekoth could see as anything close to his level of deific right, I suppose. Cain is somebody who is worthy of, in the manner in which he is treated as like a public symbol, is the only thing that stands at least even close to his level.
Yeah, certainly from Milekoth's perspective, that is the case.
Tonal Koth is a very, very egocentric being.
I mean, his flaw is hubris. His flaw is that,
it's
like,
almost
excessive pride.
Self-masturbatory, but I suppose masturbatory kind of implies that already, doesn't it? In the manner in which that he kind of, I don't know, pursues his relationship with Cain.
Yeah. Well, so let's go to Cain here.
Yeah, okay, let's discuss our
we've already
hero.
I mean, we've incidentally talked about
we
a lot
have
of his
talked
aspects.
a lot about Cain.
Yes,
already.
we have. I mean, I only have one or two more points to even mention about Cain, but I mean, there's still,
I want to talk about Cain's relationship with Delianne at the end of this book.
Yeah, okay.
Because, like, the last chapter, a significant amount of it is Cain and Delianne talking. And I think it exposes an interesting part of Cain's character that what you would expect through like 95% of this book and Heroes Die is that Cain is a very forward-looking person. So much of Heroes Die was like him saying, look, it's over with Shauna, stop trying to make me force this, life goes on. and it's his motivation was inch toward daylight, which is a forward moving thing. It's leaving the past behind. But yet, at the end of this book, Delian, Chris Hansen, reveals that Cain does have a little more of a vulnerability to nostalgia. When they're sitting there drinking their 100-year-old Tanaran brandy, and Cain is the one who brings up, what were we drinking that last night at, the conservatory? And Cain is the one who's digging into their past relationship as Hari and Chris.
Maybe it just takes a long time to break bad habits.
Sure. But I think it makes Cain a little more of an empathetic character. There's very little, as we've talked about earlier, ray of light type stuff with Cain at the end of this book. But his relationship with Chris, I think, is the most hopeful, because a lot of what Cain has done through the first 2 books is pretty self-centered or adjacent to self-centered, where it's like, oh, it's my family. But Chris is a friend. He's not family. Chris is the one who centers them as twins in this book, not Cain. Mm-hmm. Not Hari.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Cain would be like, he wouldn't classify it as such.
No, he doesn't.
And it could even be like
and he calls him my best friend. He calls him friend over and over and over again. And there's another line, that I highlighted at the end of the book where Cain is talking to Chris. And he says, there are only 3 people I've ever trusted in my life. One of them is my dad, and the other 2 are you.
Yeah, and it pains Cain in that character so much that, well, or I suppose it's not even Cain that notices this. It's Wraith in that moment who notices. It must pain Cain so much not to include his wife on that list.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Foundational relationship problems.
No kidding.
Yeah, but so it's an interesting kind of ending for Cain, where, as Pat mentioned earlier, it's all about revenge for him. It's the satisfaction of revenge. It's not necessarily a catharsis for his character, because his character sort of stops growing in the last quarter of the book. He hits a point in the shaft and then he just coasts.
Yeah.
He just makes his choices, and it's because his decision in the shaft is nothing matters. The only meaning that's real is the meaning I ascribe to events, so I'm just going to do my shit.
I would say that started right around the time that Chris flashed with him, and Hari Cain learned everything. Where he fit into the plan. He definitely started to pick up a lot of momentum there. I think that was actually his lowest point in this entire book. If not, I'm assuming this is his lowest point in the entire series, when he's at the bottom of the shaft there.
That's
things are
fair. I feel like that's not a spoiler.
There's
very,
very bad for him, and we only see it. It's like still getting worse at that point. You don't know if it's over yet, and that's the worst part. But I think it's, as far as the character of Cain goes, it's interesting to note that, intentionally or not, even in his catatonic state over the gruesome death of the mother of his child, Cain still fights back in the only way that he can. And I suspect he doesn't even realize he's doing it, in a way. His completely uncaring attitude about Wraith's identity just completely incenses man.
Instinctual violence.
He denies the man the only validation for his crimes that really matters to him. In a way that, Cain manages to turn even his lack of fighting into a devastating blow to Wraith's, character at that time, to his self-worth. And the only other thing I wanted to discuss about Cain here is that whether or not it's a result of his learning that what's happening to poor Faith, we see another kind of example of blatant sadomasochism from Cain to cope with this kind of horror. He begins punching the stone, the stone floor.
Yes.
Shredding his knuckles. He's bleeding everywhere. And then he thinks very distinctly and clearly, I wrote this down. This is the kind of pain I can handle. This is the kind of pain I like. So I do it again. And I think that right there, this instant, this is the moment that the lowest point that we see Kane sink to. It's absolute, and forgive me for using the expression, considering the context, rock bottom for his character. Wife dead, legs dead, daughter in the hands of a child molesting abomination. The only thing left in his world at that moment is pain, but it's a different kind of pain, and that's what he latches onto. And of course, despite the fact that I haven't read this rest of the series yet, I assume we really don't see Kane at a much lower point than this one. Like, it's all uphill, I assume, like a slippery, shit encrusted hill to climb. But
uphill, but I would the shaft is the
rock bottom,
the nadir of his character arc.
Sorry, I feel like I cut Pat off at the end there. Were you gonna say something?
The most fucked up part about the whole shaft sequence, as far as Kane goes, is that he says that he's happy. And that's one of, like, the, 2 times in his life that he was happy? Then in Victory
when he was
Stadium?
chained to the wall and he was delirious at that point?
I don't know if his happiness was due to delirium.
I mean,
but it kind
if you're chained to a wall with fucking paralyzed legs that are dead...
Well, it's not the circumstance, it's not the...
And
it's not the physical circumstances that makes him happy. It's the, like, philosophical circumstances where it's like he can just, like, stop caring and make his own decisions. And while I may not agree with that mindset, I think that's, like, real bad.
I suppose there's a power to it to know that shit can't get worse. So everything I do is only going to make things better. I don't know.
Yeah. But I don't know. There's more to Kane that we'll discuss later on, and as these books go on, obviously. Although, actually, I do have one more thing to bring up.
Shoot, let's go.
And it's maybe less about Kane's character and more about a specific scene with Kane and Mylkoth, and that is on the street with Kosal, their final standoff. The descriptions around that scene. There's this impression of an infinite moment.
If it was an infinite moment. It struck me as an oxymoron. I actually remember reading that earlier today, as I went and skimmed through. You're right. You nailed that.
Because I highlighted this, and there's a whole paragraph describing, like, the street where he says Mylkoth brought his own kind of spring, drawing life from the city's fallow earth. And it's where, like, social police and household knights and good old Onconan regular infantry digging themselves out of their burrows of rubble, helping each other up, even the wounded, even the dying, so that all can rise in respect, then kneel in reverence at the arrival of God. And it's weird. Weird is the only word for it. Not in the debased and degraded sense of the mere peculiar. Weird in the old sense. The Scottish sense. The Old English root. Weird. W-Y-R-D. And he says, because somehow I have always been here. And there's this, like, multi-page description of, like, this infinite moment. And there's a real shift in tone with this scene and with this climax. Because obviously we've had, like, gods and men fighting and dealing with each other through Heroes Die and Blade of Tyshalle. But in this moment, Kane seems to be elevated onto the plane of gods, where he's experiencing events outside of time. And he uses a term during this where he says it's raining weird. He's used it a couple of times before.
Really?
Yeah, we're he's talking about, like, something's, like, really messed up. And he's like, it's raining weird.
Huh.
And
I didn't realize that.
That's, like, it's an important thing at the end of this book because it's such a dramatic shift, but it's so skillfully done where if you don't think about it in the moment, you can just kind of gloss over like, oh, it's this like climactic, in the moment thing for the main character that you get in a lot of other books. I mean, you could compare it to like The Flame and the Void in the Wheel of Time, or where it's like a oneness where you're connected to everything. Mm-hmm. But when you think about the way this is worded here versus the way he describes walking out onto the Sand of Victory Stadium at the end of Heroes Die, it's a very different description. It's a very different experience of the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a dramatic shift that happens right at the end of this book. So.
No, good. Yeah, good point. That's something that I hadn't appreciated on my first read through either.
We've seen this kind of thing before from other characters, but it is weird coming from Kane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I hope if you plan on keeping up with the series, I hope you like things like that.
Well,
if you do,
I think it's safe
up.
to say that we'll be keeping up with the series at least on the podcast here. Yeah.
Sweet. But that was my last point about Kane. Do you guys have anything more you want to talk about?
No. I pretty much covered everything Kane related that I wanted to, at least directly Kane related that I wanted to discuss today. But
I have shot my last bolt.
All right.
So
final draft.
Next. Well, I mean, that was just about Kane. I still have a couple of just miscellaneous thoughts to get out of the way.
Oh, sure. Final thoughts. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do some final thoughts before we get to the final draft here. So, I was very torn, as I said at the top of the show. It was a fantastic novel, but a horrible read. Stover definitely proved himself as a writer to me with Heroes Die, and he only got better with his prose in this volume. It was longer, it was funnier, it was more beautiful and downright disgusting, like all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a small interesting note. During chapter 23, I was reading and I came across a reference. When the social police removed his helmet and we finally got a glimpse of his face. And we read, "It's like the Patriarch and Shazam and Captain Marvel vanished, leaving a middle-aged bookkeeper in his place." And it made me laugh out loud because at that very moment that I read that, I was in a car, in the passenger seat in London, Ontario, heading back to my sister's house, having just left the theater after watching, you guessed
Captain Marvel.
So, I mean, I had literally just left the seat in the theater about 8 minutes before reading that line. I swear to God. So, I mean, it kind of made me laugh out loud.
I love it when things like that happen.
Yeah, that's great.
The Cosmere lines and...
Yeah. I also want to say, I want to point out how incredibly easy it was to find those quotes about Tonal Koth. Every single time that he mentioned, "I am Tonal Koth," with an e-reader. It was really easy to find those quotes, actually. All I had to do was open the search and book function and just type those 3 words, and boom, I had, chapter this, chapter that, the progression through the chapter it happened. I could go right there with a click of a button. It was awesome. I mean, I have physical copies of most books we've read so far on this podcast, but just the e-reader, I mean, nothing really beats that,
Yeah, no, it's e-readers, I will admit, are
they're
extremely useful for
race.
Literary criticism purposes.
Yeah, and my very last thought of the show is I want to say that it was really cool. One thing stylistically speaking that Stover did. When he was describing the state of those afflicted with HRVP on Overworld, he chooses to dissect and reconfigure one particular word in a very interesting way. It's when he uses the word unhuman, time and time again. Unhuman. Like, reading this, I thought, okay, someone in the editing process really dropped the ball on this one. But then I came to see it for what it was. It's just a new word. To me, at least, it's a new word. Where, inhuman, the word I took it to means non-human. Unhuman specifically implies a subject that is no longer human.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that is downright terrifying to consider
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
it's
so
it's
that's
a
my final
fundamental change
for the show. Yeah.
in your like RNA.
Yeah.
Yep.
Throwing some foreshadowing to when we finally get to the gap.
Absolutely.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
Now there's some dark shit.
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
like. That is my flavor of dark shit.
Well, anyway, so Pat, do you have any final thoughts that you want to go over?
Okay, hold on, guys.
Or
I'll
are you
be
done?
right back. I hear something. I'm gonna have to go. Continue. I'll be right back.
No, I don't have any
Okay. Well,
final thoughts.
so I do have a couple. And as reluctant as I am to touch on this subject, I do want to go into the blind god. I'm not going to talk about Kohlberg specifically,
Right.
because I'm done reading this book. I'm done with Kohlberg. I'm done with all of that, awfulness. But one of my favorite things in this book was the way Stover continues to draw back references to our current timeline. You have like Microsoft and Turner and all these different things, and the blind god, and the way the blind god concentrates its power is through Sim City.
Yes.
It's called Sim River, but it's built on the same game engine as Sim City, and it's like a massively multiplayer online version of Sim City. Only they're all doing god things with the river, and so it's turning this like common video game from the 90s into this epic godlike focus, and I thought that was the coolest reference back to his time, making Sim River a thing. So
I appreciated that, and the whole implication that has on video games as a form of entertainment was really interesting. It came and went pretty quickly, but it got me thinking a lot.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciated that sequence.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So that's my last thought, and so now do we want to move on to the final draft here?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
boys.
we can do that for sure.
All right, Rob, kick it off.
I'll even kick it off, yeah, because as I admitted earlier in the show, I totally forgot to go and get a beer for this podcast. So I just raided the fridge and I found, of course, good old trusty Molson Canadian. Again, I think this is like my 5th or 6th time having the Molson Canadian on the show. It's a solid choice. I just it's your average standard beer. Standard. I guess that's also kind of a bit of a redundant, but it's every it's a safe choice. I never go wrong with that one. Molson.
Yeah,
Canadian
listen,
case.
like I'm a hockey player that I can't talk about the number of times that I've had a Molson in the locker room after a beer league game on Wednesday night, and
somewhere, I'll just bring a Molson because I've no one really.
It's drinkable. It's easy.
It.
It's better than most of the shitty domestics in America, like Budweiser or Miller.
Budweiser, yep. Oh, sorry, that was a weird sounding cough. That one. No, that made me actually cough now. Sorry. Yeah. So, go ahead.
But yeah, and so Pat.
Yes.
Dropped the ball a little bit.
Yeah, I was like I mentioned, I was at the grocery store, and we can buy full beer in Colorado at the grocery store now. But
more than I did. I didn't get to the grocery store.
So for this podcast, I have been enjoying the crisp, wonderful, cool, refreshing juice of the apple, brought to us by Kroger, I'm assuming. And you know what? I love beer, but I have no regrets. This is
apple
delicious.
Juice or apple cider?
Apple juice.
Juice?
Apple
Oh
juice.
man, you gotta get that cider up in you. I had some cider the other day. I forgot how good.
I appreciate them both. I appreciate them both.
Oh man. Well, it's a good thing that this was the episode that you guys dropped the ball on, because I think I have a beer that makes up for
Yes.
Good.
for this.
Please save the day.
Thinking about Blade of Tyshalle, I was like, man, what the heck am I gonna buy that will be thematically appropriate for this? And I you know, like I've been seeing this beer on the shelves in liquor stores in Colorado for like a year now. It's from a small brewery like in like Podunk, Colorado, like on southwest in the mountains. It's called Elevation Brewing Company.
Elevation.
Yeah, Elevation Brewing Company. So it's a bourbon barrel stout. It is called Oil Man.
Of course it is.
Oh, God damn it. That was clever.
Yeah,
Damn.
so I hadn't tried this. I've been seeing it all over for like a year now as this place started. This particular beer, Oil Man, the standard bourbon barrel aged imperial stout, I have never had before tonight. I've had the coffee variant and the coconut variant of it. But even those I just had for the first time like a month ago. Oh, dude, the coconut. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Man, you haven't lived until you've had a coconut bourbon barrel stout.
Add that to the list,
for some
man.
reason, like every bourbon barrel stout, doesn't matter the brewery, like doesn't matter the quality of the bourbon barrel stout. They throw coconut in that shit, and it's delicious.
Oh, coconut.
It just works with the bourbon.
Dog shit, delicious, man.
But yeah, I mean this is the straight up the original Oil Man, and man, it's thick. It is dark.
Thick
it
with
is
2 C's.
Oily as you would expect, and I mean you got like a lot of chocolate and just really sweet boozy flavor in here, and it is so good.
It is delicious. I can confirm.
I let Pat try a little bit of it while we were going through the episode here.
I get my hands on a can or a glass, a jar. What is it? Whatever.
You got a lot of stuff on your list.
Yeah, when you come visit in Fort Collins,
if I have one beer of every beer you want me to try, I will still end up in the hospital.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you're gonna need to spend like 3 or 4 days here to get through everything.
Yeah, definitely. Sweet.
But yeah, so I think that's a wrap on the final draft. Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah. So this has been Inking Out Loud episode 15.
15 episodes.
Yeah. And I am your host, Drew McCaffrey, with your co-host, Rob Santos.
Word.
And our excellent guest, Pat McCaffrey.
Deuces.
Yo!
Yeah, and next week, we will be doing the entirety of Skyward by Brandon Sanderson.
More Brandon Sanderson, yes.
Yeah, we...
Always welcome to this podcast.
We needed a little bit of a lighter, easier read, a little less horrific than Kane, before we go back into Kane Black Knife. Yeah, but we will be going over the whole book. We're not doing 2 episodes for that one. Yeah. So if you plan on reading that along with us, definitely now's the time to dive in and do some work.
Join us next week.
But for now, this has been a great episode, guys.
I think this is our longest one yet. Yep.
It is by a substantial margin.
Oh boy, yeah. This is a monster. So
thanks, Stover. Thanks, Obama.
Thanks, Obama.
Oh man. Well, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Adios.